95 more coronavirus infections confirmed, with focus growing on an emerging cluster involving foreign domestic helpers. As calls grow for mass testing of helpers living in cramped dormitories. And Lebanon demands answers following massive explosion in Beirut.
Hello and welcome to TVB News. Another 95 coronavirus infections have been added to the local tally, including 3 imported cases from India and the Philippines.
And for a second day in a row, concern is growing over a cluster of infections involving foreign domestic helpers. Kana Chu begins our coverage.
For 4 straight days, new coronavirus cases in the city have been less than 100, with more than half showing epidemiological links with previous cases. This afternoon, authorities also clarified only one of the 28 who shared accommodation at a Wanchai boarding house with an infected foreign domestic helper last month had returned to her employer.
We are able to track down the names of the 28 foreign domestic helpers, and we are arranging them for the deferral saliva test. We also get hold of the one who had gone to the new employer to get tested.
But the probe into close contacts and potentially tainted locations is hardly over, as a second Indonesian helper is among the latest 60-plus people testing preliminary positive for COVID-19. Prior to her diagnosis, she stayed with an employment agency in Shangwan with 4 to 6 other foreign domestic helpers for the whole of July. Joining her new employer on August 1st, she developed a fever 3 days later and occupied a hotel room in Changguano while waiting for her COVID test result.
She went to the new employer for a few days, and the whole family will be put under quarantine. And for the other 4 to 6 foreign domestic helpers, we're getting hold of them, and we'll double check whether they went to the new employer or not.
Citing Singapore's experience, the communicable disease head expressed worries about potential outbreaks within cramped hostels. To curb the spread of the disease, the government is expanding the scope of free testing covering various buildings and public estates in Wong Tai Sin, Kwun Tong, Tu Mun, and the Yau Tsim Mang districts. Starting tomorrow, some 86,000 residents from 46 buildings will be screened in batches. Civil servants have also been ordered to work remotely for an extra week until August 16th. Emergency and essential service providers will continue to work as normal. Kana Chu, TVB News.
Meanwhile, experts want more testing for foreign domestic helpers staying in dormitories.
As Natalie Kynes tells us, the cramped conditions are raising fears the virus could run rampant in these dorms.
An Indonesian foreign domestic helper with COVID-19 had stayed in at least 3 dormitories with over 40 other helpers. A helpers agency estimates that thousands of workers have been living in cramped boarding houses like this one during the pandemic. Many of them wait in limbo for 2 to 3 months, unable to start working until their visas are approved.
I feel so nervous and worried because we are so many in here, and then because I don't know if who's affected, and then we keep going outside.
This hostel has put in strict measures to prevent infection, including bleaching the floors twice a day and keeping strict logs when someone goes out.
We just log in the paper there, and then we put the time, and then what is the reason why we're going outside, and then we come back. We have to log in also how long we stay outside.
Ho Pak Leung, a microbiologist from Hong Kong University, told a radio program the solution might be to mass test all domestic workers living in boarding houses.
I think it's useless. We give them the test, and then they are all negative. Then how do you know later on, after 1 month, after 2 months? You cannot take the test every week or every month.
There are 36 bunk beds in this flat, all placed quite close together. Although there is no air conditioning or partitions between the beds, the owner says it's still better to live here than in some other boarding houses, where domestic workers might not even have a bed to sleep on. When the helpers do go out, it's often to wait outside the immigration tower for their visas.
I was been here from 7 something. I'm going to extend my visa because I cannot go back to Indonesia.
Currently, it takes authorities over a month to approve their visas, and lawmakers say that's unacceptable.
Is it feasible for them to have the application to do it online? They have been working in Hong Kong for more than 2 years. That their history is very clear. I don't think that there is any complication for their applications.
Natalie Kynes, TVB News.
Starting tomorrow, Hong Kongers wanting to visit Macau and Guangdong will have to show they are COVID-free a day before departure.
As Jackie Lynn reports, some are worried about the impact on cross-border family visits.
In a swift turn of events, the mainland is stiffening border controls towards Hong Kong in light of the city's third wave of COVID infections. From 10 a.m. tomorrow, all Hong Kong visitors traveling to Guangdong via the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge and Shenzhen Bayport must produce proof of a negative test done within 24 hours prior to their scheduled departure time. That shortens the period from the current 72 hours. Travelers also need to undergo 14 days of quarantine. Keeping in step, Macau announced the same rule for Hong Kong visitors. The new measure not only spells greater trouble for frequent cross-border travelers, but it could be a tall order to fill. Like this woman who was taken aback by the 24-hour test requirement. Chances are we can't make it for the border clearance, she says. This Hong Kong retiree who lives in Shenzhen says he will visit relatives in the city much less often. While cross-border truck drivers are exempt from the quarantine mandate, they can only stay on the mainland for 8 hours. But many locally employed drivers live on the mainland and now have to stay with their relatives in Hong Kong given the tightened measures. Others who are not as lucky can only sleep in their vehicles overnight. Jackie Lynn, TVB News.
A COVID-19 support team from the mainland is triggering friction between the government and some pan-democratic politicians. The government is condemning the protests against the team, calling it a smear campaign against the central government.
Meanwhile, a second batch of specialists from the mainland is on standby to travel to Hong Kong to help expand the COVID treatment facility at Asia World Expo. Haley Zhou has more.
A team of 6 experts, 4 medics and 2 architects from Wuhan's Fangcheng makeshift field hospital finished preparations to come to Hong Kong to help the city fight its worst wave of infections so far. One member of the team who asked not to be named revealed they are keeping tabs on Hong Kong's situation, waiting for the SAR government's cue to depart. He says their mission is to build a makeshift hospital at the Asia World Expo, but not necessarily something similar to the one seen in Wuhan. The team hasn't seen the site yet and has a rough floor plan to increase the number of beds from the current 500 to 2,000. He also says it's understood that they will not handle patients themselves, but offer advice and guidance from behind the scenes, unless there is a manpower shortage, which there isn't for now. An advanced team from the mainland tasked with boosting the city's testing capacity has hit the ground running, but they were greeted with protests by pan-democratic politicians, including district councillors, when they visited a lab in Tai Po. They expressed concerns over personal data amid absolutely no details about the team and their plan. The government issued a statement late last night saying their abhorrent behavior caused disturbances to the team, accusing them of smearing the support provided by Beijing. It reiterated its gratitude towards the central government. It added details will be out once there is a feasible plan in place. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
In other news, police have reportedly issued summons to 24 people for taking part in an unlawful assembly on June 4th. Activists Joshua Wan, Nathan Law, lawmaker Eddie Chu, and Andrew Wan are among those told to appear in court. The organizer of the annual candlelight vigil, Lee Chuk-yan, was again summoned for helping to arrange the event to remember the bloody crackdown in Tiananmen. The case is set for September 15th at the West Kowloon Magistracy.
Overseas, an investigation has begun into how tons of a highly explosive material was stored at a Beirut port facility for 6 years, following the massive deadly explosion that ripped across the Lebanese capital.
At least 137 are now confirmed dead and another 5,000 are wounded. Port officials are under house arrest over accusations of negligence. Leslie Tang has more.
As night fell, rescuers and residents combed what was left of Beirut's port warehouse district. Countless people are still missing as the blast was so strong it hurled some into the water. Investigators are also searching for clues as to what caused the massive blast. The huge explosion rocked Beirut's port, sending shockwaves across the Lebanese capital. The probe is focusing on how 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate was sitting in storage for 6 years at the port with nothing done to remove it. It is a highly explosive chemical. U.S. President Donald Trump originally labeled the tragedy as an attack, but appeared less certain.
I can tell you, whatever happened, it's terrible, but they don't really know what it is. Nobody knows yet. At this moment, they're looking. It could, I mean, how can you say accident? Somebody was, left some terrible explosive type devices and things around, perhaps. Perhaps it was that.
Experts believe the blast was not intentional. They suspect fire that engulfed fireworks stored at the port could have detonated the stash of ammonium nitrate.
Most of the accidents we have analyzed in the past look the same. It starts like a small fire because of maintenance, welding, a cigarette, doesn't matter. Around fireworks, you have zero tolerance to those mistakes, and we are positive that fireworks was ignited. There is a massive presence of fireworks in the event, and this what ignite the ammonium nitrate.
As cleanup efforts continue, hundreds of thousands of residents have been left homeless. The government has put port officials under house arrest amid speculation that negligence was to blame. This is the most destructive single explosion to hit Beirut. Leslie Tang, TVB News.
When we return, experts worry about a surge in local suicides as the pandemic takes its toll on mental health. Facebook and Twitter removes posts by Trump on the coronavirus. And remembering the horror of Hiroshima 75 years on. Welcome back. Now to the first of our special reports on mental health awareness amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
Experts are warning that the psychological impact of the resurging virus could be deadly. Dong Yao-Nie with more.
Stricter social distancing measures, a shrinking economy, and rising infections each day. Mental health experts are warning the psychological impacts of a prolonged COVID-19 pandemic is far-reaching, even fatal. Their concerns come from prior lessons. A staggering surge of suicides occurred during the 2003 SARS epidemic, bringing Hong Kong's suicide rate to a record high. Researchers at the University of Hong Kong are seeing an alarming resemblance this year due to the worsening COVID-19 outbreak.
When we have the chance to read the death notes of those people who die, I mean, they have indicated it is their fear of contracting the diseases, and also this is social isolation. Actually, this is what we are going through now.
Do you worry that similar fallout would happen in Hong Kong again?
Yes, I think we worry very much.
And a new survey already shows the destructive toll COVID is taking on the city's mental well-being. Among some 11,000 Hong Kongers interviewed, around 3/4 of them say they suffered from moderate or severe depression in the past 6 months. And 4 in 10 had significant PTSD symptoms, including fears and deep anxiety.
It is very alarming. Overall mental health situation in Hong Kong is not good, and we are in a very serious situation.
For Hong Kongers, the trauma is even more devastating if combined with the months-long social unrest last year, which divided friends, families, and the society. That's especially true for younger adults.
Young people are actually exposed to more of the traumatic events as a result of the social unrest. Mutual support is very important. Family and friends social support.
Experts say it's normal to have anxiety and tension as stress responses to the epidemic. But if you have the stress that lasts for more than a month, please don't wait, seek help. Dong Yaonie, TVB News.
Overseas again, Facebook and Twitter have clamped down on U.S. President Donald Trump.
The social networks say the president's accounts violated rules against sharing misinformation about the coronavirus. Peter Caveas tells us more.
Donald Trump is getting a thumbs down from Facebook. The social media network took down a post from the U.S. president. Twitter followed suit, hiding the same clip shared by Trump's campaign account. Twitter says the video breaks its COVID-19 misinformation rules. Trump did not back down, doubling down on his claim during a White House briefing.
I'm talking about from getting very sick. If you look at children, I mean, they're able to throw it off very easily. And it's an amazing thing because some flus, they don't. They get very sick and they have problems with flus and they have problems with other things. But for whatever reason, the China virus, children handle it very well. And they may get it, but they get it and it doesn't have much of an impact on them.
This is not the first time a social media post by Trump has been questioned. Last month, Facebook added a fact-check label to the president's substantiated claim, mail-in voting will lead to a corrupt election. A statement Trump reiterated earlier this week when Nevada said it will send voters mail-in ballots for November's election amid the coronavirus pandemic. Trump promised a lawsuit to block that action, but backtracked a little, claiming mail-in votes will only work in Florida, which is home to a Republican governor.
I can tell you in Florida they've done a very good job with it. In Nevada it would be a disaster. In New York it's been a disaster. In many other places it's been a total catastrophe.
Trump has long claimed mail-in ballots would compromise the integrity of the election. Experts say voter fraud is rare, whether it be mail-in ballots or with traditional polls. Peter Caveos, TVB News.
Elsewhere, a fire at a hospital in western India has killed 8 coronavirus patients. A blaze broke out in the intensive care unit of Shrey Hospital in the city of Ahmedabad. One paramedic is being treated for burns. Investigators blame an electrical short circuit for the fire. Fires are common in buildings in India because of poor safety standards with inadequate fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, and fire alarm systems.
Bells tolled and painful memories were revisited in Hiroshima today for the 75th anniversary of the world's first atomic bombing.
While ceremonies were downsized due to the coronavirus, survivors continue to urge nations to fight against the threats of rising nationalism.
Thousands usually pack the Peace Park in central Hiroshima for the anniversary, but this year, overall attendance was scaled back so that only survivors and their families could attend the memorial ceremony itself. Japan's Prime Minister was among a much shorter list of dignitaries in attendance. At 8:15, the exact time the bomb exploded 75 years ago, a moment of silence was held and the peace bell rang. On August 6, 1945, a U.S. warplane dropped the bomb, nicknamed Little Boy.
All of you who see this picture can judge for yourselves the extent of the menace to civilization of this new weapon.
The bomb obliterated the city, killing 140,000 people. Thousands more died later of injuries and illnesses.
That's the atomic bomb exploding at Nagasaki.
3 days later, another bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, instantly killing 75,000 people. Japan surrendered 6 days later. Before sunrise, before the ceremony, many made their annual visits to the cenotaph for bomb victims. Sato Nakahara, who was just a baby when the bomb dropped, lost family in the devastation. She says people need to know what happened and learn lessons so they can teach their children. Hiroshima Mayor Kazumi Matsui said such pain must not be allowed to repeat itself. In a speech highlighting Japan's failures, Matsui said society must unite against the threats of nationalism, pointing out what survivors say is government hypocrisy. Tokyo has not signed the nuclear weapons ban treaty adopted in 2017. Instead, the government pledges to stand by its 3 non-nuclear principles of not possessing, producing, or permitting entry of nuclear weapons into Japan.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.